Friday. So good to see you again. We are back at it with another formal interview and formal informal. It is Friday after all. We are going to be talking about art therapy today with the very talented Joshua Michaels. Hey everybody coming in. Thanks for joining. So what I want you to do right now is go ahead and invite 5 people because we have an amazing guest today, Josh. Hey, there he is, Joshy. We're going to get some people in on this call. We're going to talk about some art therapy, and just to start, I want to just do a little bit of housekeeping. You know where to find us. Our website is www.mindfulhealthicc.com. You can reach us on our socials, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. Reach out. All of our sessions are offered online and available pretty much 24/7. So anywhere in the world you can reach us. So let's just go ahead and invite our guest and wait for him to accept the invite. And I hope everybody's having a great Friday today. What a great Friday. Something's happening. Hey, Sophin Rich. Hi. Hey, John.
Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Wonderful.
So great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm glad we could finally come together on this. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
this is awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today out of your massively busy schedule. I know you have a full schedule, and when you're not doing family stuff, you're working, and when you're not working, you're doing art stuff. And so thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. We have a little lag in our internet, our delays in our internet. We are coming from 2 different parts of the world, so I am still here. That's okay. That's okay. It happens. Yeah, it happens. We'll just work right through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everybody, if you're just joining in, I want you to go ahead and invite 5 people to join in on this conversation, because Josh is going to tell us all about art and the therapeutic aspect of it. And we are talking today with Joshua Michael, fabulous artist.
That's
Thanks for
right.
joining
That's
us,
right.
Josh. And why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into the space of art? Where did that all start?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll make it as short as possible for, because we've got a time limit here. But so when I
We
was
have we have
very,
an
very
hour.
young, hey, I'm telling you, it's a long story. It's like a 43-year long story. No,
Okay, we have it now.
right. Yeah. So when I was young, I would say kind of it's always been in my environment, but when I was young, say I think I was around 12, there was some really, really emotional things that I was kind of put through. I had to kind of deal with depression at a young age, like most kids.
Sure.
I grew up in an environment that really wasn't very supportive of psychiatric help, or any type of
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It was pretty much like, hey, that's your problem, deal with it, whatever. I mean, those things just,
Yeah.
yeah, just the accessibility. I grew up out kind of in a remote rural area. So long story short, when I was very young, kind of some traumatic stuff had happened, and I ended up spending a summer. There was a summer that I picked up a pencil. I was kind of suggested, and I think I went shopping with my mom, and I saw a how to draw Marvel comic books. It was a big
Wow,
old book.
Zers.
Yeah, big old thick book, how to draw Marvel comic books. So she picked that
If
up,
that's not a
kind of.
great first introduction, I don't know what is.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and, and, and so taking that book, I studied that book, and it talked about perspective and figure drawing and all these other elements, and it really just kind of became my passion at that point. And then I got noticed by some teachers because I really didn't have any interest in art prior to that summer. I had no interest. You know, I was
Oh,
a
okay.
doer. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was a
Yeah.
doer. I was out and about causing trouble, getting in, being a kid, um,
Being a boy.
being a boy. Yeah, yeah. And then I found this new world where I could speak through art and creativity, and it came from that comic book element. So, I kind of played both sides of it. Growing up as a child, I went through the academic portion of it, studying a color and all these other things,
Yeah.
as well as kind of my own, trying to find my own voice in art.
Yeah.
And that took a long time because I've always been able to replicate in a way, like take images. Like I know with your drawing and stuff, I've always been able to take stationary images and replicate them pretty thoroughly. But developing my own voice is probably one of the biggest challenges, especially when I was young, because I felt like, well, it had to look like this, it had to look like that, because
Right.
that's what society views as acceptable.
Right.
So yeah, so that's kind of a thing, and then fast forward many years of just tinkering. I went to school for art, graduated. My profession is not in art though, and there's a reason behind that, and
Okay.
that's yeah. So that's
Okay.
because again, where I live, we didn't have this fancy thing, called Instagram,
Right.
or the internet or
Yeah.
TikTok. All you
Hmm.
had was what you could
Hmm.
basically reach within your means.
Hmm.
And as an artist, I live in the dead center of the United States, and a very conservative city, yeah,
Called
called Topeka, Kansas.
Topeka.
Topeka, Kansas. Yes. Yeah. So nothing. The people here are great. All that good stuff. It's
Yeah.
just when it comes to art, it's taken a
Resources are
while
limited.
for. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's it's always kind of been treated as a secondary thing, and it's never. I mean, now it's starting to develop. There's art communities and stuff, so I'm really happy for that. But yeah, growing up, that's only less than probably 6 or 7 years old, that environment. So
Yeah.
having
Right.
done this, since I was 12 years old and been labeled an artist since I was 12. Yeah, the funny thing, not that this is matters, but even in grade school, this is how silly it is. Even in grade school, I would sell my drawings for like 10 cents, 25 cents.
Oh my
I draw like Batman, and then I'd
Yeah.
sell it to the schoolmate for like, 25 cents or whatever. And then,
You were an entrepreneur
eventually
from the start.
I was, I
Yeah.
was.
You had a strong hustle game right from the start.
Well, everybody was excited about it. And I'm like, man, maybe I can make something with this,
Your middle name
maybe
was Street, right?
yeah,
Well,
no,
I have to jump in real quick because you did mention the drawing of me, and I just want to show everybody because, I mean, if you haven't checked out Josh's stuff yet, and if you don't follow him, there's something wrong in your life and you're missing. So you need to go follow him and you need to connect with his art. But I was so honored that he agreed to do a portrait of me. And so I'll just show it here. This is what you had done for me. And I just am blown away, like just so talented, so talented. And this is from a still shot that I
yeah.
had sent Josh. So basically a picture that I had, and he had drawn, um, painted this picture and drawn this picture for me from that still shot. So I just, It's always somewhere where I can see it. I'm truly honored to have it. I thank you very much for it. You really are super, super talented. And make sure I mean, people can contact you for sure to get some of your
Oh, yeah.
art and yeah, and all that stuff. But I wanted to go back because you said so many juicy things in there in that like short time. I know you made this long story super short, but you said so many juicy things and so many things that are connected with what we do here at the clinic at Mindful Health. And I wanted to go back and touch on a little bit about the struggles that you said that you were having when you were a youngster, and that it wasn't really sort of accepted, or nobody really knew how to handle it. And I wonder, as a kid growing up, as you said, in that particular area, in that smaller town, how did that impact your relationships, like in school with friends, or did it at all? Or did you find that how did you cope with navigating to deal with things on your own without having that
Um,
support?
it definitely, I I would say that the cats, I've got a kitty cat here that's being interested in what I'm doing. So I would say it had a huge impact. So to understand me, I have what I would label one close friend, a buddy that I've known literally almost all my life since I was 5 years old. And outside of that, everybody else that I interacted with was pretty much labeled as an acquaintance. I didn't have like people come over to my house to play, or I wouldn't go necessarily to their house. My world literally revolved around this one individual who basically knew me from a small child.
Yeah.
And we still communicate with each other, and we're still in touch. So in terms of schoolmates and how I interacted, I didn't really have a major pull towards the social life. Like,
Mm,
the world kind of went on and I just lived in it. Like, I wasn't ever pulled one way or another. I think
yeah.
the only time that did, and I'm not sure if I'm answering that question, but the only
Yeah,
time
yeah.
that happened was probably with athletics, when I did have a brief time where I was involved in athletics, and there is a lot of camaraderie that goes around that, and there's a lot of, you're an athlete, so you're going to associate with the athletes and stuff like that. And when
Right.
I broke away from that, it things just pretty much returned back to the way they were before. So, um,
Did you find that physical interaction with the athletics have a positive impact on your mental health at all at that time, or did you notice a difference? Or
it did.
mm,
It did. I did. How do you say? It introduced me to, I would say, physical fitness, exercise. Not that I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I've always, or was, I don't know that I am so much now, but I was always a very fit, high metabolism, very active individual. But it introduced me to a new level of exercise. And to be honest, and I only think about these things now, but it was something that actually I think brought some uh, calming elements, some clarity, because
mm,
there is a relationship between exercising and repetition and focus and staying on track, and those elements are really, and I don't, and kids, and I mean, it's not necessarily said like that to you for a person to understand, but
yeah,
now, having been through it, it makes sense that I responded to that, because it kind of brought my thought processes, which is really all over the place. It kind of brought it into focus and allowed me to excel at certain things, because I wasn't so all over the place, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and you can tell you're an artist because the way you explain sports is very much like a drawing. There's sets and elements and so you could, if anyone ever wondered if you were in fact a real artist, you are.
Yeah, that's what
I
that's what
love that.
people
I
keep
love that
telling me.
thing. What's that?
That's what people keep telling me, even though I
Yeah.
tell them, I said, I'm not an artist, I just like to draw, I just like creativity. They're like, you're an artist. So,
I love that dynamic. I love that thinking that way and thinking of it compartmentalized and setting it different sections. And I love that piece. The other thing you said too, which I really loved, is that as you started getting into art, I mean, again, your very first book,
Hmm.
marvel, learning how to draw marvel. Like, most of us learn how to draw, a puppy dog with floppy ears. And, you like, there you go, showing us all up, ready to draw marvel. Like, here we are with our puppy dogs, and you're all Superman and shit. But one of the things that you
Well,
said is that you were art allowed you to breathe, like you were allowed to
yeah.
speak through art. That is
Oh,
so
yeah.
powerful. Can you touch on
Well,
that a little bit? Because being able to speak through art, what that means for you?
I will. I do need to say, and this is not going to make things better. My mother had a anatomy book that was an illustrated anatomy book, and that was the other book I studied that summer. So, not to make it
Interesting.
better, yeah, but I spent a lot of time in both how to draw marble
Hmm.
and how to draw from, the anatomy standpoint. So,
Right.
I did kind of, maybe take on a lot. But so
So I'm going
speaking
to say
through
you
art,
have a lot of pictures of livers and kidneys and nothing else.
right? Yes, yes, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Uh, no, um, so verbally, I don't know how many people go through this, but I go through this on a regular basis. I speak in a way that I understand, but not necessarily that other people understand. Art has been to me the one form of expression, the form of language that I
Mhm.
feel like when I speak it, when I create it, everybody seems to understand.
Mhm.
So to me, when it comes to color, when it comes to line languages, um, I mean, everybody knows, essentially, the sun is warm. And, there's elements that everybody kind of experiences about nature that you can pull those, you can pull those elements into art through color, and just through imagery and different stuff like that. And it just, to me, exploring those things, I've never really had an issue with again doing that and then saying, do you see it, or how does this make you feel, or
Right.
whatever it may be. It
Mhm.
seems like to me when I do that, that's the one time where it's arguably a result that it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And where when it comes to language, even text messaging now, people, it's just like, oh, what did you mean? What did
Mm.
that mean?
Right. The
What's that mean?
interpretation of it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Um, so, and I don't know if that has to do with it being, they say art is subjective and this and that. I don't know if that's what it is, where it's more acceptable, but I do know that I find my inner voice when I'm just when it's just me and the paper. And
Mm.
when we come out, when it's done, you know it's like, wow, this is something. It's
Yeah, I love that connection of the interpretation piece, because it's so true. When we and this happens to everybody all the time, when you talk about sending text messages and things and how things come through, but with
mhm,
art, there's a certain sort of understanding of, like
mhm.
like you said, people get it, and we talk a lot about these kinds of things when we talk about relationships here at Mindful Health, and we talk about languages of love.
Oh yeah.
And it seems to be that, like you said it yourself, is that art is really a language for you,
Mhm.
which is
Oh, it is.
it's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. That's the way you speak to people. Do you find that's the way you speak to people, or what you feel comes through you more so?
What I feel comes through me. I'm able to. I feel like I've been able to get to a point where I can relay that emotion better than I could have in words, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
yeah, through me.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
know they say pictures worth 1,000 words and all that stuff, but regardless, anymore, with all technology, we still try and communicate through words, and that's beautiful. But
Yeah.
so another experience, kind of to help give some information. It was one of the so there was a point where this was probably the first time that I felt actually connected, like emotionally, I was connected to the art because I've always done it technically, if that makes sense. I've always had the technical element because there's a technical and there's an emotional. So, you know, it's like, I mean, you know what I'm saying. It's like a car. You've got the mechanics that build it, and then you've got the designers that design it, and it's, you know, so,
two parts.
yeah. So technically, I've always focused on making sure that I can control the medium from a technical standpoint, but never dove into that emotional standpoint.
So when you say control the medium, what do you mean by that? Control the medium? Is that with the elements?
So that means, so what that really means is that when you put, so when I have a pencil in my hand and I'm creating something, it's up to me to determine the outcome, right? I have control of the outcome of what happens. Ultimately, no matter what, my hands are going to produce that outcome. So how I use those tools to produce that outcome is how I would say the control is what I'm saying about the control.
Do you feel like you ever do you feel like there's ever a time where you don't have control? You feel like you just start drawing and just whatever comes out without that forethought, or without, you know, going into something thinking you were going to draw a certain thing and it ends up being something else? Or do you always feel like you have control over it?
No, there's so many facets of what I do that absolutely I have always done my best to not be one way or another. So what that means in regards to that is absolutely I do exercises where I literally I have zero control. So it may not be anything recognizable. It's just ultimately what, like you said, what comes out and what happens with that. I find that when I do that, I often do tend to focus on almost a shell, that circular shell shape that everybody talks about, that kind of mathematical, like that tends to be something that interests me, the curves and the lines, things like that. Those things kind of come out. It's to me, it's a little bit more of a dance, and that happens when I really. So the only time that I absolutely do my best to maintain 100% control is really in a situation like when I did your drawing. So ultimately, I know that your satisfaction is going to be based on the outcome of that drawing. So I put all my effort into making sure that things are in the right place. You know, lines are the right length, space is laid out. Yeah, ultimately, you know, the measurements are in the right place. I make sure that technically everything is correct. And then I often come back in, whether it be with colors or whatever, and I just, you know, go with what needs to be, what's calling to me, what says, you know, hey, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, this is what I want it to do. So does that kind of make sense?
It does. So the medium is the pencils or the pens or the colors or that's your medium, and then you control that through what you envision something to be, or how you want it to look, or the thought that you have in your brain of how it's going to turn out, and that's how you control. Is there a particular like emotional connection to any of those mediums? Like do you have to really resonate with the materials that you're using? Do you find that you prefer certain things for certain reasons, or do you find that there's, you know, you have a real passion for paints or markers, or like, is there emotional connection there to the mediums that you use?
Oh yeah. So you one thing about me is I'll work with the medium, and that's kind of part of it, what draws me to it. So for a long time, it would have been pencil and ink, different things like that. And that I would have worked with, that I had that connection, that I felt like I really was able to convey what I. And then, so when I got into college was really the first time that I'd ever dealt with painting. I mean, I'd done watercolors,
Sure.
but mostly it was colored pencil. So you're still on that pencil.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So moving into painting, it introduced me to a whole new form that I had to learn, because I could, you know, you have a pencil,
Yeah.
and it's that technical, and I've got that. That's done.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm as, you know, and so painting's like, whoa, what am I doing? So ultimately, having to then dive into painting and learning the processes of painting, I got into oils, and oils are a fantastic creamy medium. You can do so much, and things are so beautiful, and they last forever. And it's a great downside of oils is, if you get good stuff, it's so expensive. It is so expensive.
Is it?
Yeah. And there's a process to it. I mean, there's preparing your canvas. There, you know, there's a certain mixtures that you have to get. There's a whole book that's written about different ways to mix the thinning, like the spirit. We call it Lin spirit, or we call it what is it? It's spirits. It's basically alcohol or whatever. The thing.
It's not linseed, is it? It's not linseed, is it?
No.
No, that's
Linseed.
That's like a different oil, I'm thinking.
God, what? It's basically like your alcohol. But
Is it mineral spirits? Like
mineral spirits.
Okay.
There you go. I was drawing that blank because I just use it and then don't even. Mineral spirits. So you have a mixture of your mineral spirits, your linseed, and depending on how you mix those, it can determine your finish. So so there's whole books designated to different mixtures and different processes. And I mean,
does it change the hue of the colors too, depending on how much you mix and how much you like the ratio? Does it change the color at all?
No,
or no, just the viscosity.
No, because it's all clear. It's clear. It just pretty much changes the thickness. So the more you have, the more watercolor it's going to be. The less you have, the thicker it's going to be. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just to answer that question. So you've got oil, which oil was a big draw. It was a really complicated process that I really dedicated a lot of time to learning and developing, and it was so wonderful. You can take, and there's a process of where you ultimately you values. So I'm going to speak in terms of values. So gray, but when I say values, I'm referring to the range of color from light to dark. So from white to black. Yeah. So everything in between. Gray. So all your grays, there's thousands of levels of gray depending on how sensitive your eyes are. So essentially there's a process of where you build an entire piece of artwork using values, grays, and then come back in with your color, and it creates kind of it gives it life, it gives it substance, it makes it real, like it's actually there's weight. Yeah. So using that in oil is really a fantastic process, because if you use acrylic, and I know this wasn't necessarily a Bob Ross session, but you know,
R.I.P. Bob Ross.
Yeah. Love him.
The number one pro. Yeah.
So acrylic is a little bit closer. It's kind of like what I would call the equivalent of crayon. It's it can be used and beautiful things can come out of it, but you're not going to get transparency. You're not going to get that element. With oils, you get transparency, and transparency is an important part of building, essentially building life. I mean, you can do some beautiful things, poster art, whatever. Yeah, I mean, oil really gave that means. So, which brings me to my point you asked. When I started doing TikTok, now keep in mind, I know that's how we met and all this other stuff. There was a long period of time where I did absolutely no art. I went through some again, I'm back. I went back into that. There were some life-changing events. I went through a divorce
Sure.
with my ex-wife, and I dedicated many of my younger years after college to just being a dad, being a parent, and
Yep.
being a husband, and doing those things. And I tried to do some of those things for myself, like stay with the art, but it wasn't in my head. And because to me, the kids were always going to take priority. This was the first time where, number one, you get this mixture of emotional, not knowing, not understanding what's going on, being stressed, being put in situations that I didn't act that were not pleasurable in my mind.
Sure.
My whole life was basically just it was just shook up and rocking and not knowing what to do. So it kind of brought me back into that, especially with TikTok. I started meeting people, and I started doing videos first, and then realizing that I wasn't getting anything different, and it was just like everybody. It's like, there was nothing really. I wasn't gaining anything other than, maybe something to do. And then I realized that one thing I wasn't doing, I wasn't bringing in the one thing in my life that really made me whole, brought me together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Absolutely.
instantly when I brought my art into TikTok, it was like a bomb went off, I mean, it was crazy. And I still revel at the idea of when bringing that in, that brought a sense of peace into this already distraught world that I was living in. And it just brought peace, and it brought people in, and I just, so what happened. So when I started that, I was really only using ink and pencil and maybe some simple, I think I had some old Prismacolors that I was using. Very, very
Oh,
basic.
Prismacolors.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Very
love those.
basic.
Yeah.
So very basic, but I couldn't afford, I could not afford more materials. I was
Right.
going through all this stuff. I couldn't
Yeah.
go out and buy, a $150 set of markers. So I
Right.
just continued to use what I had. And
Sure.
then the support of everybody. I had a friend that said, "Hey, why don't you set up a wish list?" I'm like, I mean, why would it, people they're not gonna, buy stuff for me. I'm like, I'm
Right.
just a guy, I'm just doing this. And I
Is that
did,
on
and people
Amazon?
supported.
That's a wish list on Amazon that you put up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
My
Yeah.
wish list on Amazon,
Where can
and
people
people
find that?
started supporting.
Where can people find your wish list?
It's on my TikTok. There's a link. I have a link
Okay.
tree.
Okay.
I I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's also on my profile on Instagram.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think.
So people well, if it's not on Instagram, people can definitely go to your TikTok, right? And
Yes.
it's in
Yeah.
your link tree on TikTok. Okay. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
you
I'll
set up
double
this,
check that it's there.
okay. So you set up this wish list.
Yeah, and people started supporting it, just, buying materials for me, and buying markers and buying these different things. And it was a time where I could look and say, "Oh, that's an interesting product. I'm kind of like to try that out." And so I'd put it on the wish list, and somebody, people would buy, and I ended up with all of these different art supplies, and I just started bringing it, kind of working with them and playing with them. And there was a time where I thought about, man, maybe I should do reviews, but I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep pushing the media. Like maybe I
Yeah.
should review, like,
Yeah.
this marker sucks, don't buy this product. I never encountered that, though. All the
Yeah.
products that I got, I
Mm,
found a way to use them in one way or another.
yeah.
Even if,
How
yeah,
was that for you when people were sending you? How was that like? Did that just speak to your heart? Was that an emotional thing for you too? Was like,
it, it was big.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
it was big. I couldn't believe it, and I was so appreciative, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like I even, I'd tell people, you don't have to do this. It's like I set this up just because, but it's like, you don't have to do this. And
Yeah.
so and I did my best. I believe in when someone would send me something, I would do like a thank you drawing on TikTok, or
Yeah.
I would do something
Yeah.
to say, hey, this is amazing, and it's wonderful, and I'm glad that you're supporting me in it. And that was probably the first time that I kind of felt like an artist. That I
Oh.
honestly internally said, okay, okay, Josh, you can say you're an artist now. And
I'm the
and
realest shit.
um
It's for reals.
I don't know about but to what I wanted, kind of what I wanted to get to, and I know this is a long answer to your question,
That's
but
okay.
some of those materials, I use multiple things when I create, like your piece. It
Yeah.
probably has, well, I know it's gonna have ink. It's gonna have different type of marker colors. It's probably got pencil lead in it.
Mhm.
I mean, there are so many different things that I use, because to me, it's about the finished product, not about what I use to get there. If that makes sense, it's kind of
Yeah.
like what do I need to make this piece speak the way I want it to? Not
Yeah.
I have to use this specific product to make
Right.
it.
And you just keep building and building. It just creates depth, right? And I think that's probably part of the pull towards the oil.
Oh
The
yeah,
oil medium is because it's just you've got that depth there, right? It just creates that
yeah,
depth, which is amazing. That's
yeah.
so amazing. I love that. I love that. And I love that and you said this back and I wanted to make sure I noted this because I loved how you said that there was a point in time where you drew the way you thought you were supposed to draw.
Oh
The
yeah,
way
oh
society
yeah.
tells you you're supposed. So there's a picture presented and you're supposed to draw it exactly like that. And that
Correct.
wasn't really your thing. You're like, no, I don't really like the power to recognize that, Josh, and to say like, okay, but that's not how I do it. And
Right.
that's like to veer off and be your own person and do things your own way. I love that because that really is the essence of art. It's self-exploration, right?
Oh yeah.
And that kind of gets into that therapy piece, that therapeutic piece of really, what does this piece mean to me? It looks one way, but maybe it looks different to me. So touch on that a little bit because I love that piece how you sort of went against the mold and said, no, I'm going to do things my way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it is a recognition. I would say that part of that came from studying art history and
Hmm.
understanding those elements. So prior to being at a collegiate level, it was all technique, and it was, you didn't study what other artists did. You just did what the teacher told you to do. So
Right.
when I get into college and I start learning about some of these other artists, these, Renaissance artists, these impressionist artists, these artists that really, from a national or world standpoint, people know their names, Picasso and Van Gogh, and these names, and for me, it took me into a thing that was like, well, what's driving them? They they're creating stuff, but what drove them? Like, what was that behind it? It wasn't the outcome necessarily as what was happening, whether it be psychologically or the environment. And so studying like Picasso's standpoint, where ultimately the only way I could say is he himself got to the point where he didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
He would make people wait in his foyer for days to pick
Mm.
up their artwork. And the thing is like, not that I would ever compare myself to him, but it's the fact that you have to think. I finally was able to get to the point where I could think differently and know my worth. Like, hey, people love this. I'm doing something and I'm successful at it,
Yes.
and I'm not. I mean, I'm obviously a respectful person, but at the same time, it's like you're going to respect the fact that I'm producing something for you, and you
Yes.
need to understand that.
Yes.
So yeah, so taking it that way, but you still have that element in you that knows that this needs to be pleasurable for not only me, but the person that I'm producing it for. the last thing I would want to do is offer somebody some form of art from me that they look at and they go, a child could have done this, even though many times that's also acceptable. I mean, how many times, again, to use Picasso, how many times do people look at some of his artwork and go, I don't understand this. But
Yeah.
you know that he was an amazing, amazing artist. So
Mhm.
those kind of bringing those things together, the technical and just the spiritual, there's a bond that you make with the art that basically speaks
Sure.
to you.
Yeah,
It speaks to
absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
when it speaks, you have to listen. And
Mhm.
when you're done with that piece, if you listen, others are going to listen too, and they're going to see it and they're going to love it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it is. So,
It's a
yeah.
mutual respect almost for the piece and the person who's
Oh,
looking
yeah.
at it. There's a story, I'll just tell it super quick, that kind of fits in with what you're saying about how people perceive things. And Tony Robbins, I don't know if you pay attention to him at all, but he has a very good friend, Steve Wynn, who's a big, hotel tycoon. But he tells a story of him calling Tony Robbins up one day and said, I bought this amazing painting and you got to come over and see it and come on over. So he's like, all right, I'll come over. So he goes over to his house and he goes, there it is. And he shows him this painting and it's a red circle. and,
Yes,
and he says,
yes,
isn't it great? Isn't it fabulous?
yes.
And Tony goes, well, I mean, it's very nice, but I mean, it's a red circle. Like, he's like, and he's like, no, look at the way it's shaped and the way it's like, that's a perfect example of how two people see something completely different. And,
Oh, yeah.
it was just, it's one of my favorite stories that he tells. And it's all about perception. It's all about appreciation. It's all about that respect, that relationship. And I'm sure too, that that's a big part of what you do is your relationship with art, right?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure you have a relationship with that.
Yeah.
And I know you do a lot of portraits and a lot of, I'd say most of your art that we've seen are all pictures of people.
Correct. Yeah.
And I wonder, and I maybe want to pose this question, and if it's too, if I'm off the mark, you can tell me to buzz off. But I wonder if all of your art with people and faces is a result of or a connection to what maybe you didn't have when you were younger and feeling isolated from people and feeling
Mhm.
sort of misunderstood. And now that there's that dynamic of having all of these people around you now.
Yeah. Well, when I was very young, one of the earliest, when I did dabble with paints a little bit, which was terrible. The outcome was really bad. Um, one of the ones that I did that I really did feel connected to, I did one of just faces, 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 faces. There is that element that there's something about the face, and I know it's that's where your personality comes from. That's the eyes have always. I mean, those elements really, and it's not like a generic whatever, but ultimately when you look somebody in the face, the facial recognition, that's a lot of times where the personality, you get the personality through that interaction. You don't necessarily, like, if I'm off camera and I'm talking to you with my hands, it's
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same result. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that element, yeah, that's been a big draw. I've always been, and again, that goes back to the marble. That goes back to the anatomy. I've always had a fascination with people, and whether it be human body or mind or whatever, I've always had a fascination with personalities, people, and um, figure study was something that I reveled in. I just loved it, and that's one of those strange or those tough things to kind of get across to people, that when it comes to your body, it's nothing to be ashamed of. And and I've studied these things for so long, I feel like, I mean, I'm not saying that people need to run down the street naked or whatever, but at the same time, there's, body
We are
shaming is
not
not a good
telling
thing.
people to do that.
No, no, no. But you should not look in the mirror and go, I'm ugly. You should never do something like that. And but people do tend to do that. And for me, from my standpoint, I don't care if you're, perceived as overweight or whatever it may be. Everybody has an element of beauty to them. And it's just more or less how you see that and how you perceive that. And when you eliminate the society norm and you look at it from whether it be a form perspective or shapes and colors and whatever that may be, all of those other negative things don't matter. They don't matter. Some of the oldest, artwork, Renaissance, whatever, full figures were desirable. I mean, that was a thing that going through art school that was it's embedded in my brain that these things you find, they're beautiful. It's our job as artists to show you, because I mean, that's what we do. We see it from that perspective to show you that they're beautiful. And really, I would love for everybody to feel that internally and not ever have that battle. But even I myself go through that stuff too, where I question my own physical appearance or whatever it may be. But at the same time, it all comes down to, we're all beautiful regardless. So.
Well, one of the most desirable women, iconic women in the world was Marilyn Monroe, and she was considered a very full-figured woman. And
yeah,
I mean, you don't get much more beautiful than Marilyn Monroe. I mean, what a bombshell.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So yeah.
Personality, if being able to put a personality in art, and one of the biggest compliments I ever got, and it was from Millie, and I don't even know if she came in or not, but was from a friend of mine. And what she said, she was, she still gets excited about the artwork, like when I see, she's still like, oh, he drew me, and all, and she said he does something different. He captures my personality, and it's like, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, that's what I want to do. And so to me, that's the biggest compliment, is when someone says, you got my personality. This is what that is. So,
So I'm curious to know where your mindset goes when you start drawing something or painting something. And when we talk about mindfulness at the clinic and being in that zone, I'm curious to know where your mind goes. Do you have to be in a zone to start a piece, or do you just do it on a whim, or are you connected right from the beginning? Like, what's the mindset when you're creating?
Oh, it's absolutely a dance. It's 100% a dance. So if you could imagine dancing without music, how fun would that be? How fun is dancing without
not very
music?
Much.
No. So, okay, so what I do, first of all, music, it's all about the music. I will find something that I enjoy, whether it's classical, whatever genre I want to listen to that I connect with, I put it on. And that music feeds through me. And I know this is a little bit probably out there in terms of depending on how people think about these. That music does feed through me.
We have music therapy at the clinic, right? We teach people how to connect with the certain frequencies of music to change their mood and change their mindset, right?
Absolutely.
So what you're saying makes total sense. Please continue. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're perfectly fine. So that's part of my process is once I put that, I have noise, deafening or whatever, noise cancellation headphones. Yep. I'll put those on with my music. I'll have my music. And then I'm my environment, my space has to be clean, organized, I have my stuff all laid out. So when that music plays, that's when the process begins. That's when the game starts. That's when I kick into it. So, start to finish, most things that I've done in the past. It's, you know, I put an hour into it. I'll put an hour into it, an hour a day, hour a day. The drawings and stuff that everybody has seen, very few of them took me over an hour. It was headphones on, sit down, you have your reference, transfer it onto the page, whether, you know, I always start with a nice pencil sketch, a detailed whatever. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. It's all while the music, and the thing is about the music is while it's going on and it's feeding through me, it's allowing me to be focused. So like it doesn't distract me. There's no distract. It's like the one way that I can eliminate distractions is I have this music in the background. So you know, again, it comes back to a dance. My mind is dancing with the pencils and the paper and then all the other stuff. And I don't know if you ever got to watch one of the lives where I did the portrait drawing. I wasn't sure
yet. Do you do them often?
I have not done them for a long time, but when I first started getting a big following, I would do them when this was kind of when we were locked in from COVID and stuff like that, you know. That's what I would do. I'd set up the camera and then I would just click on the live and then I would pick somebody and then I would just do a portrait right then and there and everybody could watch. And so you could see the process that I did, but the problem was I was so focused on the artwork that there was no interaction from the viewers, and the viewers liked the interaction. So I had to bring in other elements, and it got more complicated. Like I had my daughter at one point who would read to me what people were saying because I was not stopping. You know, this is going to be a piece of artwork by the time I'm done with this live, and you know, so yeah, so it definitely I get drawn to it, and music is a very, very important. And if I don't feel the music, it doesn't do anything for me. I will stop drawing when there's commercials, like Pandora. You know, it'll have these commercials pick on. Okay. I stop because I hate commercials. So it takes me out of that. So then I have to wait for that commercial to be over, and then it's like, okay, we're back in. You know, it's that process. You get, I mean, it's very spiritual. It is very spiritual. Yeah. It is. Yeah. And I feel like it has to be. It has to be for me. So.
Yeah, it has to be for you. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Because I would assume that every artist has their own way of doing things. Everybody's unique in their own way. But but for you, it's a spiritual connection. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What do you get? I know all that you put into your art, but when you stand back and look at a piece, does it give you something back? I know you give it a lot, but is there an exchange there of energy with you and your piece that you created? Does it give you something back?
Well, let me put it to you like this. Keep in mind that every drawing I do from an incremental level is an element of me. So when I'm putting the pencil on from the beginning to the end, I'm putting the pencil on the paper, whatever it may be, I'm taking pieces of me and putting it on that paper to produce unique images, right? So every element of that picture is a piece of me. So when I step back, when I finished it, to me, it's just, you know, a thousand different gestures or thoughts or you know, movements or whatever. And so for me, it's a prism. I mean, it's a prism of art when I step on it. You know, it's an image, and that's the idea, but it's the process as well. And so satisfaction, you know, a sense of completion. If I don't like it when it's done and I don't like it, I will express that. I don't like it. You know, I'm not happy.
Yeah. How is that piece? Do you get that often, that juxtaposition of like that, you know, you put something into, it just doesn't like, it's almost like a conversation with yourself sometimes, right? Those pieces.
Yeah. Well, it's a conversation with myself. It's a conversation with the art. Most of the time that happens, there were distractions. Something distracted me. Something pulled me away. Okay. Something lost that and 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 so a lot of the time, that's when I will either redo it, I'll do it again, um, or I'll pick a different image. Maybe there was something in that image that
Mm.
that was that I didn't, I didn't connect to or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, everything, pretty much everything I do, I do, like I said, it's to me, it's an adventure. People see, a face or hair or eyes or a body. To me, it's an adventure.
Yeah.
It's going in a castle and slaying the dragon and opening the treasure chest. I mean,
I love that.
yeah, that's what the piece of art is. And just when it's done, it looks like a person. And that's kind of how
Oh,
I live. So yeah,
when it's done, it looks like a person.
yeah.
I love that. I love that. It's like when you I don't know if you do any sculpting, but you start with a clump of clay and when it's done, it's a thing. I love that. When you're done, it's a person. I love that.
Yeah, until then, it's an adventure, and it's not, for me, it's not necessarily about the end game as much as it is about getting there, and
Mm.
sometimes that's the reason that I don't like it, is because maybe something in the process happened that I didn't like the result of, and so
Mm.
that immediately triggers that kind of distance from certain things, and it's like I didn't like how that turned out, so I'm not really, other elements of this might be really beautiful, but this flaw that I encountered, maybe it was just a smudge or something I
Mm.
wasn't happy with, and so it's time to start over.
Gosh, that's such a juicy life lesson. You're really going through life's journey in a piece of art. Like,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it's about. It's not always the destination, it's the journey. It's how you get there, and things happen along the way. And sometimes
Oh
you
yeah.
got to just pick up and start over. And it's just, my goodness, the facets that you're that you're spouting out,
And it's
how it resonates with actual life circumstances is just art is just such a big piece of that.
mhm. And it's me in the paper. It's me in the paper. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the other element, is it's you can see it from a standpoint of almost, and I don't necessarily mean to go in a down, but it's almost a war with me in the
Mm.
paper. Like,
Mm.
it's that's those are the only two people involved in this, is me in the paper, and however it comes out, I mean, that's what it is. And there's so much peace in that. There's so
Yeah.
much peace in that element, that it's just me and the paper and how it turns out. So yeah, it's a sculptor too. I'm
Yeah.
sure sculptors feel the same way. It's
Yeah.
them in the material. It's them in the rock. It's you know that's what it comes down to, and you learn a lot about yourself through that process too. So
I
that's the
love
one time where I feel like who I am. I
mm.
don't feel, I mean, I don't overly feel the need to be any other way than who I am anyways, but when it comes to just being at peace, that's when I'm at peace, is when I've got pencil, when I've got paper, when I've got, that when I'm there, that's when my mind is absolutely at peace. So,
Yeah, I love that. And that connection with peace. I mean, it's hard, I think, with everything going on and people having the stress that they have. And you know, finding peace is, it's not an easy task. So for you to be able to tune in and find that, that's being mindful about that and connecting to that and having the ability to do that is precious, is
yeah,
precious. Um, I want to ask you a few questions, if we could, because I
yeah,
think we're coming almost up on an hour, and I don't want to. Yeah, we're almost there, and I don't want to get cut off because
okay,
this is
okay.
such a fabulous chat, and I just fascinated with your perspective on things. It's just really beautiful. I want to ask you what your favorite media. We know you got the pencil down pat. You're like, you're Denzel Washington with you're surgical with this bitch. You got the
Okay,
pencil
okay.
down pat. But what's your favorite medium to work with?
I gosh, there's so many good ones though. That's like, what's your favorite color? I mean, come on. Is that
Come
fair?
on. Okay, what's your
Is that
pick two?
fair?
Pick two. The ones you prefer the most, or ones you use the most. What do you? If someone was going to start out as a newbie artist,
Mhm.
what would you recommend they get first?
I would say they need to be probably pencil. Well,
Mhm.
I don't know if pencil's an option. If pencil's not a colored pencil's a great medium. Marker, the oil based. There's an oil
Yep.
set of oil based markers. You need to have a good range of color. Whatever you start with, have a
Mhm.
good range of color. Color should never be secondary. Like color should be an important part. If that's what I know, some people like black and white or the whatever. There's a whole world of black and whites, and there's a place for that too. But color, artists, you're gonna dive into color at some point.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of color. Have a good variety of color, because there's nothing more frustrating than wanting to produce a brightness or whatever and not having that color to do it. So
Yeah.
markers are I enjoy markers, but yeah, oil. I mean, even it's painting. Oil is a fantastic, but it's not for beginners. You can't start with oil.
Yeah.
Um,
It takes a
not
little
I
time to
mean,
get to there
yeah,
correctly. Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
you could start with oil, but you need to do research before you start with oil. I should say that. Do some research. But oil is a beautiful medium. Probably if I had to pick one for the rest of my life that I could only work in this medium, oil paint would be the medium. If someone said you can only work in one medium, I
Yeah.
would probably go with oil paint.
And why am I thinking that oil is like there needs to be a certain respect there with oil? Like why am I thinking that oil paintings are dangerous? Am I thinking of that right? Like I always remember as a kid, like a family member saying, "Oh, but there's like oil, there's danger with oil paintings and the smell or something like that." Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, you in most cases it's good to wear gloves. It's because the paints can absorb into your skin, and a lot
Okay.
of them have elements like lead or the blue, the cobalt,
The
different things that
cobalt,
they use
the
to make
cobalt.
those
Yeah.
colors.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
they've taken a
it-
lot of that stuff out now though, right?
yeah,
Isn't it a little bit safer
yeah.
than it used to be? But I always remember like as a kid thinking oil paintings
Oh
were
yeah,
like were yeah,
yeah,
danger
yeah. You're
zone.
yeah. The chemicals that they used to make them were toxic, and so you really, I mean, long-term exposure. You think about,
Mm,
artists, old Renaissance artists would put
mm,
paintbrushes in their mouth and what that kind of
mm.
thing would do to you. But yeah, it's ultimately taking those colors and those chemicals that they used to make them. But yeah, the ones that have the original, those are they still make them, but they're really expensive.
Yeah,
Most of the stuff you can find at Hobby Lobby or whatever, they're
right.
relatively safe. So, but
Okay.
yes, absolutely. There's a chemical element with oil that makes it dangerous.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. So a respect there is required. When
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you could see any painting in the world, what would it be and why?
Oh man, you're making them tough, aren't you?
Well, we ask the
Okay.
hard-hitting questions here at Mindful Health.
Yes, you do. So I don't want to sound too, I don't know if obtuse is the right word. I don't want to sound too conceited, but I always teach, especially my kids, that you should never compare yourself to another artist. You should only compare yourself to yourself.
Mhm.
So being around it, um, like I surround myself with my art. I love my art. Now, if someone said, "Hey, there's a gun to your head. You need to pick an artist that other than yourself," then I would say that I would probably want to see Picasso, something along the lines of
Mm.
Picasso, because I've seen like I've been to the museums and seen like Chuck Close, which has huge.
Right.
They're just enormous. But I think either that or Banksy. I would love to
Oh,
be able to see
ooh.
Banksy
Yeah, that's a good one.
person.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah.
For
I
sure.
mean, I have a passion for a lot of the older, the ones we know about, but Banksy, I think there's just something about how he does it. And it's, it is what it is, but
Mhm.
I think if I could see a Banksy in person, I would, yeah, that's what I would.
You'd want a ticket to that show.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd want to
Yeah,
take a picture.
yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
um, if there was any one piece of advice that you could give someone venturing into the world of art, what would that be?
Again, kind of like I tell my kids, don't compare yourself to anybody but yourself. When
Yeah,
it comes to art, study other artists, study how they do it, go that route. I definitely teach yourself, learn, dive into the styles, dive into the books, practice, but don't compare yourself to anybody except yourself
I
because
love that.
it's unique. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's you. No, there will never be another you. So,
that's right. That's right.
yeah,
You got it. You got it. What does art mean for you?
happiness,
Hmm. Yeah.
completion. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I love that. Completion.
yeah,
Completion.
yeah.
Is a piece ever done for you? Is it ever done and over, or is it always continuing for you?
Um, that's a tough one. I have learned that there's a point where I walk away. That doesn't
Mm,
make it done.
mm,
That just means I walk away.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you can overwork. I can overwork a piece. I can
Hmm.
overwork a piece. So there is a point where I have to say no more.
Mm,
But if I didn't develop that, I had a painting years ago that I repainted at least 2 or 3 times because there were certain things I could never get right and I was never okay with it. So I redid it and I redid it and I redid it. And again, that was when I learned you got to walk away. You can't
yeah,
keep trying to push it. So,
yeah.
you know,
Kind of like
yeah,
life, right? Some things you
yeah,
just can't fix and you can't change, and you just gotta
yeah,
walk away. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
So
Well, I
is
have
it
one more
done?
question
No.
for you, and because I know your time is valuable, and I have loved every second of this interview. You are a wealth of knowledge and inspiration. My last question for you, Josh Michaels.
Is it going to be a hard one? You hit me with the
No,
hard
no,
ones.
no, no, no
Okay.
more hard ones.
All right.
What do you know for sure?
Oh God. I thought you said it wasn't. I don't I don't know anything for sure. Okay. I will never say I am the person that you speak to about that because I know everything. No. Where life is an adventure. I
Mm,
mean, that's the
yeah,
thing. You
sure is.
some of the greatest people in the world always say, that I don't know anything because that's how you get yourself in trouble, you know.
Mm.
I don't
I know
I
nothing. If he
know
says he's
nothing.
dead, he's dead. I know nothing.
Right, right. I no, I will. No,
Oh
I
my God.
absolutely. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy talking about art. That's my piece of happiness is when it comes to
Mhm.
that. So if anybody ever wants to talk about it, I I I will never, and I don't think any teacher should ever tell you that something is right or wrong because it's not their piece of work. Now there's a
Yeah.
technical side, but when it comes to saying this, you're doing this wrong, absolutely should never happen in the world of art.
They
There
just don't
is
want you
no
to be great. They don't want you to be great.
right. They're repressing you. They're repressing you.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Well, tell people where they can reach you, get a hold of you on your all your socials,
All
everything,
my social.
website, socials, everything. Where can we reach you, find you, contact you for art, everything?
Okay. Well, Instagram. So if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't added me on Instagram,
Okay.
do so. You can message me through Instagram. I do have Facebook,
What's the name?
which
The name's on Instagram. What's
which
your name on
it
Instagram?
it is it is Guy underscore who underscore
Mm-hmm.
drew
Mm-hmm.
underscore
Mm-hmm.
something. Guy
Okay.
who drew something. So that's gonna get you there. Now, don't message me on TikTok because I
Okay.
can't check my TikTok. Okay.
Okay.
But if you want to communicate with me, either Instagram, um, Facebook is another one that I use, which is a weird one. I think it's Josh Michael 3. Either way, probably Instagram's your best way, especially now that you can communicate with me. Um, so outside of that, I've got some websites,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't tell you off the top. They're all in links. They're
They're
links,
all the
man.
links. Okay.
Yeah.
So your
I use
links are on
Linktree.
TikTok and on Instagram, right? And people can
Yes.
connect with you to get pieces commissioned,
Yep.
and they can purchase art from you as well too. So all that good stuff, right? And
Yeah.
you're really great at getting back to people right away. So that's
Yeah.
one thing I love.
It,
Yeah.
it always starts with a conversation,
Hmm.
what are you interested in kind of deal. So if people are interested in art, we'll have a conversation, we'll figure it out. That's where, the t-shirts, the shirts, the art, everything that I do ultimately is a conversation of
Hmm.
what you're looking for and whether or not, like, you know, I don't do tattoos. Yeah, I
That
could
was my
draw
next
one for you.
question.
Yeah, I could draw one for you, but if you wanna go under the needle, I'm not your guy. I can draw it up, but I'm not putting on tattoos. So
And you
there
have
are.
Teespring too, right? You have Teespring, you
Yep,
have a shop, you have online merch, right? People can
yep.
reach you there. What's your handle on Teespring so they can buy some of your stuff?
Well, again, that's in the link.
Okay, it's a
So
link.
yeah,
Okay,
so it's all through that link because I've had to make weird, names
okay,
and stuff to make
sure,
connections. So
sure.
yeah, that's through the link. So that's going to be in the profile is going to be your best means of getting
Perfect.
and navigating because there's so many facets that I've dove into. I just, I
Yeah,
had to bring them all together and
yeah,
and go that route. So yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
Josh, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for sharing your gift and your insights on art and art therapy and mindfulness. I appreciate you very much. I have a lot of respect for what you do. And we'll keep in touch and we'll talk soon, buddy.
All right, sounds good. All right.
Take care.